Well, we're going to start this week with the Champions League final. PSG Champions League winners for the second year in a row. Arsenal obviously very close to winning it for the first time. Mark, James, you were both at the game. James, I'm just going to start with you first. What have you made of the reaction to the game? There seems to be this kind of narrative that PSG deserved to win because they were the only team that turned up and wanted to play football. Are you of that opinion, or were Arsenal deserving of a bit more credit than that?
I mean, I don't think. I think two things are being conflated here. That there's the style question about Arsenal, which is valid, and is a season-long question about how they've built a team and how they want to play football. And then there's how you approach a final against the best team in the world. And I don't think there was any other way Arsenal could have played that game to have a chance of winning it. And also the fact that they scored so early, what was it, 5-6 minutes in with Kai Havertz, it almost reinforced that idea of, well, actually now we've got something to defend. And whatever their plans were, I think the fact that they had a lead to protect probably made them almost revert to type even more than they might have planned to beforehand, because, as I say, they had something to defend. And, and if they could see it out in the way that they've been winning games 1-0 quite consistently of late, then they'd be European champions. So I don't really see the criticism of the way they approached it too much. I mean, you could argue maybe on transition they should have been a little bit braver, because it's one thing to have 25% of the ball, but it's also one thing when you get it to not really commit anyone to counter-attack. And really Arsenal didn't do that, particularly as the match wore on. I think both sets of players got very tired. Extra time was fairly non-eventful, really. I mean, there were moments, I suppose. There was the Noni Madueke penalty shout, which I suspect we won't have heard the last of in the next few months. And I suspect Arteta will be thinking about that and probably will bring it up quite early at the start of next season. But I mean, it wasn't exactly sort of, chances galore and end to end, and the game had sort of probably resigned itself to penalties by that point. So, look, I think credit to them. They were 2 kicks of the ball away from being European champions. And when you come that close, I don't think you can really be sort of overly critical of that one-off performance. The wider debate is very, very different.
Yeah, well, I agree with James on that, in the sense that I really admire the way that Arsenal defend. That's taken a lot of work on the training ground, a lot of time to be so rigid, to be so solid, and Arsenal are the best at it. So no objections to the way that they defended. That's fine. That's the way they play. But my issue is that, first of all, the lack of ambition. After 6 minutes, you can't just sit back and defend for 84 minutes to hope to win it. That was FA Cup giant killer tactics. They were playing like a small team against a big team in an FA Cup side. But the key issue for me, and I think this is where Arsenal got a bit of a reputational problem going forward, is that the time wasted and the delaying tactics, and the trying to con the referee with, falling to the ground so easily. I mean, you'll have all seen, there's loads of clips on social media being done about this, about how it took Arsenal 3 players to take a throw in at a certain point. One player gets it, throws it to another player, throws it to another player. Then you've got Mosquera was booked early in the second half, again failing to take a throw in quickly enough. You got the situation at half time, which I thought was really, really poor. It was really small time, actually, when PSG were on the pitch for at least 2 minutes before the Arsenal players at the start of the second half. And the Arsenal players are just sauntering down the tunnel, almost like laughing at the fact that they delayed the kickoff a little bit and made it drag it out, because, they're winning. We can kill the game. We can slow it down. It's just not a good look. Arsenal are too big a club to act like that. I think we all know that a lot of clubs do that. A lot of clubs try and kind of run the clock down, but Arsenal just take it to a different level. And I think that was the issue for me, that they didn't show a bit more ambition to win the game, get another goal, maybe kill the game, and then kind of run the clock down. But it was just kind of spiteful tactics. And it's not, Arsenal are a big club. They're a club that's got a proud history, and that they were playing like I say, a small team trying to beat a big team just by killing the clock and running the game down. And that is the issue for me. It's Arsenal's reputational issue, that the fact that they're not a good team to watch in that sense.
Just to come in on that, I think there's a couple of things going on there. One is that, Arsenal historically, but when I say historically, I mean the last sort of 10 years, 15 years, have been accused of being, rightly, naive. And I always remember this conversation about dark arts, and when Arsenal returns to the Champions League, and you're playing these sides that are quite clever, and they play Porto. I remember they lost away at Porto in the first leg of a knockout game, and we were all talking about, that those kind of tactics, slowing the game down, time wasting, cheap fouls, all this sort of stuff to break the game up. And he was sort of having to fend off these questions, these sort of long-standing issues of Arsenal lack leaders, they lack clever game management, the amount of leads they give away, cheap fouls, mistakes, red cards, all this sort of stuff. And I think what we probably saw in Budapest is maybe the pendulum swung a little bit too far the other way. And you're right, maybe there is a bit too much of this going on. But I think it's informed by the history. And actually, it brings me a point I wanted to make up, because I'm pretty sure Rob was there. Maybe we were all at that game at the Etihad when Arsenal had Trossard sent off, and they just tried to shut the game down. And I think, was it John Stones who scored right at the end? It finished 2-2. That game really has kind of come up in my mind about, I think, when we're talking about their approach to PSG. And after that match, Arteta just said, well, look, you're 11v10 against the City, the greatest team of all time. What else can you do? And I get the idea. Obviously, they didn't have the numerical disadvantage against PSG, but it was the same kind of principles. We're going to pay this team absolute maximum respect, and there is no possible way that we could try and nick a goal, or we're just going to have to try and see this out. And I think that's a switch they need to flick for next season. Maybe they've gone too far in thinking, well, we make mistakes, so we minimise risk. And if we minimise risk, we don't make mistakes, and we've got enough quality to try and grind the game out. That's sort of been the way they've gone about it. And look, it's delivered the league title, so you can't knock it. But I think the conversation we're probably going to come on to is if Arsenal are going to seize this opportunity that looks like there is now, with managers leaving at Liverpool, at City, obviously Alonso's gone in now at Chelsea. And there feels as though there's a moment to grasp here for Arsenal that they could potentially go and dominate for the next couple of years. You can't really do it, or it's exceptionally difficult to do it playing this kind of football and using these kind of negative tactics. What you want to see from them is a more expansive style, is a more front foot, more dynamic style. And I think that's where, a lot of the criticism of Arsenal this season, which I haven't always been, I have not really understood a lot of it, because they haven't won the league for 22 years. They've never won the Champions League. So you do it in any way you can. And I don't think there's any responsibility on them to try and play. But it's different next season. They're champions now. They've spent the money they've spent to get there. And the fact that they've now won the league has moved them into a different position where there is an onus on them to go and entertain and to try and win it in a more expansive way. Because the neutral could buy into the idea that this is, history for them. It's a new step. It's a new era, and it's a new thing they're trying to achieve as a club. Well, that's gone now. What else is there to recommend them? If they're going to try and grind it out for another year, then they're going to be even more unpopular than they already are in some quarters.
Just a quick one on that then, Mark. I watched Arteta's news conference after the final, and he talked a lot about individual actions of PSG forwards, Kvaratskhelia, Barcola, Dembele, who can all create something out of nothing. Now, Arsenal, it would appear, have that type of player. They have players like Saka and Martinelli and players who are able to do that. But do you see that Arsenal or Arteta is allowing his players to do those things that he was sort of admiring in PSG? Because they're obviously a very functional 11. They're probably the best team off the ball in the world. But has Arteta got it in him to say to those players, well, go and behave like Kvaratskhelia and create something out of nothing and don't be functional for that period of the game? Or is it just sort of ingrained in him to make them play in a more kind of functional, sterile way?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because I can disagree on the sense that I don't think he has got the players. I don't think that Martinelli's at that level. And I do watch Bukayo Saka sometimes and thinking, come on then, do it. He's a great player, Saka, but he's becoming like Phil Foden in many ways. He's a player that has his great moments, but doesn't really deliver when you really want him to. And if you ask me right now who I'd take Foden ahead of Saka generally, because I think he's a better player. But I think Saka has to kick on. I think Saka's the one player in that squad that probably could get in the PSG team, but I don't think he'd start. I think what Arsenal need, they need an Ian Wright or a Thierry Henry. We're going back a bit in terms of Arsenal greats, but a striker up front who's got pace, movement, who can stretch a game, who can do something out of the ordinary. I think what Arsenal haven't got is that maverick who can just turn a game on his head. watching that game at the weekend, they haven't really got any pace up front, not killer pace, and I think that would help them play a different way. We can talk about the midfield issues as well. We can talk about the Odegaard issue, but I think generally they haven't got an outlet up front that is capable of stretching a game and doing what Dembele did, for instance. I mean, if you've got a choice between Kai Havertz and Victor Gyökeres, then neither of those get anywhere close to the PSG team. So I think Arsenal have won the league incredibly well this year without having a real striker, a real goal threat. They've just had a formidable defence, a great goalkeeper, and a very strong midfield. So I think what Arteta needs to do is find a way to add somebody up front. And I know James has reported this year that they're looking at Julian Alvarez, but it seems like he might head to Barcelona. So I don't quite know who the answer is, but they do need somebody up front who can stretch a game and just do something off the cuff and win something.
I think to explain a bit more context around that in terms of the style aspect, because it's a piece that's on the site, will be on the site by the time this podcast comes out, is that last summer they talked about trying to be a more direct side. The whole point of signing Gyökeres was that they were going to change the way they played. They recognised they were spending 70-odd million euros on a centre forward who needed balls in behind. He's a very sort of straightforward player. He plays between the width of the 18-yard box, and he wants quick balls into space in behind to run and finish. Simple game for him. And obviously Arsenal didn't really play that way. They were more about control. They were slower moving the ball through midfield. They played that sort of horseshoe football, looking for openings. And so the whole sort of talk was, we're trying to shift towards this more dynamic style. And as I say, the piece goes into quite a bit of detail on this, but the sort of condensed version is that, due to injuries and due to the fact that Gyökeres kind of made a slow start, he's ended up with 21 goals, but I think the jury's very much still out on whether he's capable at the very, very highest level. And that led to, let's maybe go back to what we were doing last season with Mikel Merino in the early part of the season. And actually that worked very well. And suddenly they found themselves top of the league. They were obviously going well in the Champions League at the same time. And so as the season kind of wore on, there was almost this battle. They were caught between being the team that they want to be and the team that they were. And the team that they were, that more functional, sort of slower, methodical side, has ended up becoming Premier League champions. So what do you do now? Do you sort of double down on Gyökeres and really try and go for that more direct, more dynamic approach? Or do you actually say, we're not really sure whether Gyökeres is a player we can build our team around? And I have to say, even though it's only been one season, I've personally been fairly consistent on this, as I'm not sure he's up to it. And that if this is a golden opportunity to capitalise on, a Julian Alvarez would be a clear upgrade and would enable you to play in that way. But this is a debate that's been running all year. It's kind of the Eberici Eze sort of argument. It's distilled down to that. How much do you trust Eze, who's not great off the ball? He let Matty Cash run in behind him for a goal at Aston Villa, and then he didn't play on the left wing for about 4 months. That tells you how much Arteta prioritises that work off the ball, and maybe he needs to trust those kind of players a little bit more. But I'm with Mark. I don't think they've got enough quality at the top end of the pitch to be a PSG yet. I think they need one or two at least this summer to really transform the way they play, and then Arteta needs to trust them to do it.
I want to put this to both of you, because obviously I think it's a question going forward whether Arsenal, there's this suggestion that now Arsenal won the league, they can go on and dominate. But I think it's a bit weird that we've got a team that's won the league that hasn't beaten anybody. They hadn't beaten City this season, hadn't beaten Liverpool, they haven't beaten Adam away from home for ages. And you look at the Champions League run to the final, Bayer Leverkusen, Sporting Lisbon, Atletico Madrid, they haven't really beaten anyone on the way to win the Champions, to get to the Champions League final. So how can people say that this Arsenal series is now set up to dominate for years to come? They haven't beaten a fellow big team. It just feels to me that this could fade as quickly as it arrives. So, James, I've got you first, but Rob, also I think you should have an opinion on this as well. But is it there? Can they build on this?
Yes, because, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the year before they had a fantastic record against the Big Six, and they didn't win it. And the problem was they were drawing too many games and they weren't beating the smaller sides. There's different ways to win a title. I agree with you. It's a worrying sign for them. And actually, I was saying this to people in the build-up to the game in Budapest. Who have they beaten in the last 6 months? I mean, if you just take a 90-minute game, which top side have they actually beaten since the turn of the year? And it was, maybe you could say Atletico Madrid, but they're not. That's not a vintage Atletico side. They've beaten Chelsea, but obviously Chelsea are in a bit of disarray. And you're right, they've not beaten those top sides, and you know, it's hard to do it when you're playing that kind of football. But I just feel that the platform is there for them. And when you look at the state of flux that those traditional Big Six rivals are in at the moment, it won't take much, I don't think, for them to actually win it again. You know, I mean, they didn't even need to get to 90 points this season to win it. I think if they could win a couple more of those big games and just replicate what they've done against the smaller sides, which they seem very set up to do, then they're going to go very close again next season. I mean, as we sit here now, are they not favourites for the Premier League next year?
Rob,
I mean, I think the one big thing that they've got going for them is the fact that they're the only kind of stable Big Six club heading into next season. You know, Liverpool have changed manager, Chelsea, United have appointed Carrick permanently, City are going to have a new manager. You just, with the best will in the world, you don't know how any of those appointments are going to work out long term. The only team with any kind of stability is Arsenal. I think in their defence a little bit, from the turn of the year this season, lots of the talk and the narrative was about are Arsenal going to choke? Can they get over the line? And that brings about a certain style of football that you just kind of only focused on getting over the line and getting your hands on the trophy. And I completely understand that, which probably lends itself to some of the results they had in the second half of the season, particularly against the big sides. It'll be interesting to see what happens next season, whether there is a kind of sense of freedom now that they are Premier League champions, that they can go and play or try and play in a different way. The one thing I would say about that is that it's very, very difficult with a set group of players to change style markedly. And I remember at United, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer tried that he inherited a squad that wasn't particularly great. He decided that they were going to play on the break, play in transition. They had some great results. I think they finished second or third. And then one summer, Solskjaer decided that because he was Man United manager, he had to play in a different way. They had to be on the front foot. They had to dominate games. And they just couldn't do it. And it contributed to results falling off a cliff and him getting sacked by November in that last season. Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to happen with Arteta, but this sense that you can kind of just flick a switch and go, actually, we're played this way, but now we're going to play this way is incredibly difficult. You need to change a lot of individual players. I'm not even sure that in terms of the squad, there is that much room to churn. You look at the likes of Gyökeres and Madueke. If they're not good enough, then you can't just offload them and ship them out and get someone else in. It's just too tough to do. So you're talking about tweaking the squad in certain areas. Is that going to be enough to markedly change the style? I'm not sure about that. I would expect them to head into next season as the favourites to win it because they are Premier League champions, and people often want to look beyond the champions to find the next team that's going to win it. And I don't think that's always right. So Arsenal will rightly head into the season as favourites. It'll be interesting to see how they start next season and whether they are freer to play in a different way, that they're freer in terms of, you know, some of the results that they get, or whether it's more of the same. And then they just carry on and look to dominate in the same way that they've been successful so far under Arteta.
I mean, just quickly on that, I mean, Ben White, I think, is going to be available. I think Gabriel Martinelli, there was a lot of chat that he was actually available last summer, didn't find the right deal for him. Gabriel Jesus is another one I think will go. I also thought it was quite significant last summer that Leandro Trossard got given a new contract, but there was no extra length to it. It was just an improved salary. He's only got a year left now. So there's 4 players there, 3 in an attacking sense, who would free up space straight away. And then, you know, if you're looking at, I mean, there's a lot of chat around Morgan Rogers. He's, I think, somebody that Arsenal are looking at, along with a lot of other clubs, by the way. And then you've got an Alvarez. What I took away from the press conference, and also just aligning that to some of the mood music around the club and speaking to other people involved, there's a sense that they need to be ambitious this summer. And that, I think, is, if last summer was about squad depth, they signed 8 players, this is about improving the starting 11. And I think this summer they need to be, to use Arteta's words, ambitious. And they're going to have record revenues this summer, not just from obviously the prize money from the 2 competitions that they've got to they've won the Premier League and they've got to the final of the Champions League, but also the commercial side is starting to reap real dividends for them. That, you know, they've got scope if they can move to slightly more of a trading model, which the suggestion is that's what they're going to do. So they do move a few players on. Then that's where they need to focus on and getting that really star quality at the top end of the pitch. And that could change everything. But yeah, it comes down to, you do that, but then the manager has to trust those players and give them the freedom to be able to go and win you those matches and not necessarily worry about, marking the winger out of position every single minute of the day.